Thank you for coming to the Oblivion Gallery. So this is part of our first Saturday guest artist talks, or talks about some subject related to art that could be of interest to people. Usually in this wing of the gallery we have guest artists from outside. For February we had just sort of this blip of a short month and nobody scheduled, so we decided to dig into the archive of my history as a painter. Next month we'll have Abe Max for 2 months, and then a couple months after that we'll have Max Rink, who's joining us. So come on in. Hey, thanks for coming, you guys. Just getting started. Yeah, so first Saturdays of every month we have an event, an opening, and so this February we're showing my old paintings. So I started as somebody who was a serious painter. That was my whole focus when I began kind of taking on wanting to pursue art in my late teens, early 20s. And I went to the U of O and was sort of formally educated in drawing and painting. And my self-identity as an artist was big on I am a painter. I also grew up building forts and skateboard ramps, and in sort of punk rock culture where we broke things for fun. And in skateboarding in the late 80s and early 90s, there were no skate parks. And so we would have to build our own ramps, find some plywood, get dad's tools out, and build these crude ramps. So it gave a real comfort with tools and building and that kind of process that turned out to be super handy for what I'm doing, to this day. But there was definitely a part of my personality and development that liked the hands-on of tools and taking stuff apart and repurposing stuff for our own fun. And in skateboarding culture, when there's no parks, you use curbs and handrails and the built environment as your park. And so what that does is sort of teaches your brain to see the built environment in an alternative way. How can I make fun out of this for myself? Which is kind of what found object sculpture that I do to this day is like. It's finding functional objects and repurposing them and putting them together in a way that is, serving a new purpose from what it was intended. But in the era of the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, when I was beginning to really take art more seriously, I had done a lot of drawing as a kid, drawing battleships and planning out like schematics for forts, and I really, really enjoyed that. I had a blip where I thought, okay, I want to be an architect, and I took one architecture class at the community college, and like, whoa, this is a lot of math. I did not think that this was going to be a math thing, and there's also all this liability of like making plans for a structure, and if it doesn't go well, like, people get hurt. So I'm not doing that, and took some drawing and painting classes, and it was very enjoyable. And as I got more serious about it, it got less enjoyable. It was a really interesting process to watch, because one of my core philosophies and beliefs is follow your allurements. Follow the things that feel exciting to your soul, that are fun, that are just have a pull on you. And you don't always have to know why those things are your allurements, but following those things has usually led to good results in places that I want to be. Welcome. Grab a seat anywhere. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Oh, no worries. I'm glad you're here. Just talking about kind of starting out as a painter, and how, in the gallery right now, there's a 32-year gap between these paintings and those sculptures. And so Follow Your Allurements came from this. Yeah, The Universe is a Green Dragon by Brian Swim is a great philosophical treatise and just sort of description of how to see the world. And so one of the core ideas in this, and I read this in the mid-90s, is follow your allurements. And so taking that as my sort of manifesto and realizing, like, art and when I go into the studio should be fun. It should be like I have to do jobs and taxes and all these things that are not fun. At least this one section of my life ought to be fun and reinforcing. And so in the beginning, painting was very much that. And as I went to school for it and got, kind of formally educated by people who were very talented, serious people who had spent their whole lives devoted to learning about the history and the practice of painting, it became kind of less and less enjoyable and more like doing math problems or something. I mean, mixing paint colors is a whole science in itself, and trying to paint from a still life or a model or a landscape and having the ability to really capture what you see. And a lot of my peers and professors were very much steeped in sort of traditional painting values, landscape, figure, and it became very hard to tell, like, what do I want to do with this and what are their values with this thing. And so I got great formal education in how to represent and conceive of objects, in 3D through an art medium that is helpful to this day. I'm so grateful that I have that background, because it has absolutely served my process as a sculptor who wants to make realistic looking animals or figures or whatever. But at the time, in the mid-90s, it was just a process of doing paintings, and then gradually having interest in three-dimensional work and transitioning over a period of a couple of years to first doing paper mache, little sculptures just for fun, and then wanting a more durable and lasting medium, so I took a welding class. And in the process of deciding to sort of look at 3D art, I very intentionally decided I don't want any formal training in this. I want to know how to use a welder, and then leave me alone. And I have plenty of ideas. That's not the issue. I don't want to know the formal, properties of three-dimensional art. I just want to have a good time doing this and be excited to come to the studio. I think one of the other things that appealed to me in that transition, and it was a hard transition at first, because I really had this idea and identity of I'm a painter. I have oil paints and a studio for painting and an easel, and I'm a painter, and painters are cool, and I'm one of them. And so as I began doing three-dimensional art, I felt like I was like cheating in a relationship or something. Like I would go over here and secretly make these paper mache masks. So like, this is fun, but it's not painting. It's not serious art. So I had to kind of get over that. But also the property of painting versus 3D art, like three-dimensional art is a real object that is really there in front of you. And a painting, the kind of painting I was doing, is always representing something. It's representing a scene. It's like creating a little fake window to a landscape, or making a mirror image of a self-portrait. It's creating a replica of something, where a sculpture really, to me, seemed like this has its own identity as a real thing in shared space that is an object in its own right. Another thing, a couple of more things that I discovered around painting, I didn't have the natural talent for mixing color that some of my peers did. I would notice in U of O classes, one of my best friends was a super gifted ability to render and draw things that he observed and to mix the colors exactly as he saw them. And I would come to class early and try to get my paints mixed up and ready if we're doing a still life or something, and I would waste a lot of paint and get close to the colors, but never as truly on point as I could observe, my friend was able to do. So I felt like something was sort of just missing in my natural ability to do that. And drawing wasn't as appealing to me. I mean, I could get by with it, and these are probably the best paintings that I did, and that's why I've saved them over time. A lot of my paintings ended up in the Lane County dump. I just, there's no reason to save all these figure studies. This is not a person that I knew. It was just somebody who came and modeled for the class, and it's badly done, and her hands look funny, and I'm just getting rid of this. So the paintings are kind of sequentially, the first couple here are done in 1992. These are done in acrylic paint. And my process for these was usually taking a photograph and adding color to what the photo was. So this iceberg sort of ice-scape was from a National Geographic magazine, and everything was completely like white and snowy and icy. And I was just so in love with this shade of blue and sort of purple that I copied the picture quite faithfully and then just added my own colors. And this one that's sort of black and white with these circular shapes, that is from also National Geographic. It was a X-ray of bone cells and sort of radiography that was highlighting the parts of the cell that were growing versus the parts that were just hardened, established bone. And it was just this really cool looking shape that, seemed like an interesting abstraction. So most of the time my paintings were done from observation of real life things or photographs that I was really drawn to. There are two that are purely imaginative, but these cows here were, a friend had her parents had like a hobby farm, so there's 5 cows in this sort of shed barn thing, and we were there house sitting for a weekend, so I just brought my easel and set up and hung out with the cows. The back painting is my brother and I in New Hampshire on a family vacation, and my mom took a photo, and so it was just, I really liked the look of us, kind of at this riverscape. But that's a really good example of not nailing the colors. When I'm done talking, you can look up at it closer, and the issue is not really creating the values of light to dark. There's color in there, but it's not really getting the dark depths of the forest that should be present in trying to recreate a realistic scene. And so now, years later, I can see that with much more clarity than I could at the time. The other, in all honesty, the other thing that hindered my paintings at this point in my life was I was smoking a lot of weed all the time. And so what that will do is make you fairly satisfied with things that are not really satisfactory. You're having a good time, you're high in your studio, and so you're overly satisfied with what's in front of you instead of really having that critical eye that is needed. Hello! No worries, come on in. Glad you're here.
This is Susan Zado.
Hi, welcome. Yeah, glad you're here. Just talking about paintings, and you came in right at the part where I was talking about my history with smoking a lot of weed while I was doing the paintings and being overly satisfied with how the paintings looked compared to, really being able to look at them with a critical eye. And that years later, looking at these, I can see, and especially some of the paintings, trying to capture realistic landscapes or scenes where I didn't get the real light and dark values and push those two ends of the spectrum as effectively as was needed. And you can see that especially in that landscape, the picture of my brother and I down at the end of the hall. The one right next to it on the left that's purely from imagination. So taking something like the shape of a cut pepper, just a green or red bell pepper, and sort of that shape with the seeds inside, and using that as a launch point for an imaginary sort of a landscape. The cityscape next to it is done on site, so that's looking over the Whitaker neighborhood and done by hiking up over the basalt climbing columns with my backpack and all my paints and an easel. And that was a really fun part of painting, like getting out and doing landscape painting from life is a super fun way to be in the world and to see and appreciate stuff. You also end up talking to people a lot because people will stop by and engage or ask questions or sometimes offer criticism, like, who the hell are you? I'm just trying to do my painting. Like, I don't really care what you think. But that was enjoyable. That was an enjoyable way to be out. And then the two next ones are also from photos where I've added a lot of color. So the smaller one is a slice of some sort of rock or geode that just didn't have any of the color. And then The big one here is a juniper stump that had been washed out along a riverbank, and it was all completely bleached out and white. And so what I would take from those is the forms and the lines and those things that were really appealing, and add color. And that was an interesting way for me to get from the observed environment to how to make it creatively mine. And then here's a self-portrait, and then just a little imaginary sort of seerscape. And I did a number of self-portraits over the time that I was painting. Never really that good. I mean, of the types of painting I was doing, I was the worst at portraiture and capturing a likeness of somebody. It's really hard. And when there's people who are naturally gifted at it, and you can see how well they do it, and then you can really just find your own shortcomings through struggling with something and seeing like, this just isn't my voice. This is not what my truest form of expressing my creative energy is. It's what other people do. It's what I'm telling myself I should do, but it's becoming less fun. I'm not following my allurements in this and really having excitement to come out to the studio. And so that's where I began to put aside the paintings and move into the sculptural work, like I mentioned. First starting with paper mache and feeling really playful, taking one welding class and no other instruction in three-dimensional work, and finding a lot of junk out in the world and seeing shapes that, you know, were very evocative, and how do I combine these shapes to make something new and organic out of this old, cold, rusty steel. And that became really exciting, and where each thing I did would open up other ideas for what I wanted to do. It was the opposite of what was happening with painting, where painting was feeling like it was narrowing me into a value system and a practice that wasn't really my true nature. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up building forts and skateboard ramps and breaking stuff for my own fun and setting things on fire for fun. And so doing found object sculpture with welded steel and torches, all of those things came into play. I got to break things, I got to have controlled fire, I got to build things with my hands. They were really there. It just really was, you know, finding the truest expression of the things that are in me in a creative form. And again, like, the more I have honored those tendencies and played with, you know, the different elements that are available out in the built world, in the junkyards, in what people bring to me, the more things I want to do. It's really the opposite of writer's block. I have so many ideas of what I want to do, I'm never going to like actually get to all of them. So now one of the challenges becomes having the judgment to figure out which things are actually worth doing, because they're not all good ideas. All ideas are not equal. And now that I'm not smoking weed every day or ever, I have a better ability to discern what is a good idea and worth carrying out. I have more ability to be critical of my own work and willing to cut off or redo the things that aren't, you know, truly working. And the opportunities for my projects, for working with collectors, for getting commissions and being able to do commissions, just keep blossoming. It's a really beautiful thing to be present for and be doing. I feel so lucky that I'm able to do this full time, and that I'm not locked into just repeating something that has been successful, and you know, I get to play in all the areas that are interesting, and most of the time find people who resonate with it enough to buy it or commission it or allow it as public art. So that's an extremely fortunate place to be. And so moving from 32 years ago on this side of the room to the immediate is these fish. So these copper fish right now are a project that is happening right now that, you know, it does harken back to the skills of drawing and form and composition and proportion. All those things that I learned by drawing and painting are still absolutely necessary and useful in being able to do this series of whimsical fish characters. So one of the commissions that I've got going right now is for the new condominium buildings that are at downtown Riverfront Park. So one of the buildings is complete, and I have 4 different artworks in sort of the lobby, the public area of the first one. And the interior design consultant for that likes my work and likes working with me. So she said, for this second building, we need there's 2 projects for this lobby. There's a 25-foot wall above the lobby area where we want flat artwork that represents the river and the bridge and some swallows. And so for that, I'm cutting out these silhouettes in steel of flying swallows and these river shapes and these bridge shapes that'll be attached to the wall and very much like a silhouette. The birds are going to have some built elements on top of them so that they stand out more than the river and the bridge silhouettes. So that's in progress, and I'm going to be putting that up on the wall in the studio. So if you come back next month for the next first Saturday event or anytime, you can see the progress of that. I'm going to begin putting it up on the wall in there just so that I can sort of mock it up. It'll be installed in July. The second part of that is that under this great big, river bridge scape, there are 7 decorative portals, and that's a mock-up of what size they are and the lighting and the mirror in them. And so her request was, we want something sort of water-themed for the portals to kind of keep in line with the theme. And she said, I'm gonna probably get 7 different artists to do different pieces for that are sort of playful and water themed. And so I got really excited about doing a fish for that, and I thought, like, what would be cool is a fish with a portal inside the fish that references the portal. So this fish in the middle of the shelf is got a little portal. The fisherman inside needs to be larger, so I'm going to redo this with a fisherman inside the fish just because I like the irony of that. But it just needs to be a bigger figure, so that'll get a redo. But in thinking about that, I started getting excited about other kinds of fish I could do, like fish with buildings on their back. This is a condo on a river, so thinking about a water creature carrying these built architectural forms was exciting. And then a rodeo fish, and then what about a fish scuba diving? And just started playing with these fish ideas. The process for these are 3D printed. So these are designed using 3D modeling software, and then it's printed plastic and a faux metal finish. So that gives me the ability to play around quite a bit with the form and print out something that may be sort of experimental, may or may not work. So, 2 days ago, I sent her 5 of these fish and said, I want all the portals. I think that, I have this idea, it'll show consistency, it'll make your job easier because you don't have to go find 7 other artists to do the portals, you're already working with me. And she's like, great, you got the job. So, thank you. Sometimes being assertive with your creativity gets you into places, and it's a super awkward skill for artists to say, hey, look at my stuff. But it's a world with all kinds of stimuli out there, and so if you are following your allurements and doing what you're passionate about and working really hard at it, there's no reason not to want to share it with the world, and that will create opportunities for you, whatever kind of allurement you're following. Just to sort of wrap it up, like if you're following what's exciting and you're working hard at it, and if it's exciting and alluring, it's easy to work hard at it. Like the line between work and fun has completely disappeared. It's a wonderful place to be. If you're doing that, good things will result. You'll find the people to connect with who will give the prosperity you need to live your life and to pay you to do it. It's a great, exciting place to be, and it's never boring, and it has some huge ups and downs. I got the fish job this week. I also lost a public art commission by 1 point. It was something I was invited to apply for, and I know the guy who beat me and I don't like him very much. And you know, that's part of it too. And you don't get discouraged, you just keep applying for those and just have the faith that by continuing to apply work, discipline, and fun to it, it's gonna result where it should. So that's my story. That's how I got from one side of the room to the other, across 32 years of making art in different ways. I really appreciate you coming. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments. Yeah.
Where does meeting Renee come into it?
Renee and I met almost 7 years ago because Renee wanted to learn how to weld. And so I have a large sculpture at the Thinking Tree Distillery in their tasting room. It's a big metal tree. It has an owl on it and some little details. And my business cards were there, you know, by the tree. So she was an artist in town working in a lot of different mediums who wanted to learn welded steel. And she was in the Thinking Tree having a drink and struck up a conversation with the guy working there and said, you know, who did this tree? And emailed me and said, could you teach me to weld? And so after that, we got together quickly and connected through art and a lot of other things. You know, a part of our path is that we got sober together. We've been sober 4.5 years and have taken on Buddhist practices of meditation and mindfulness and really grown in these ways together that are benefiting the art, benefiting us as humans, benefiting our community connections, and it's a really important part of our journey. Like I said, I mean, it's fine to sit and smoke weed and look at your paintings and think they're great, but it's going to limit your real capacity and development to make the best things that you can make and be the best person you can be, I believe. And so that is a huge part of meeting Renee, because Renee was the person who said, we need to get sober. This is really not doing us any favors. Oh yeah, so the Thinking Tree where we met, I mean, which caused us to meet, that company as a distillery has done extremely well, and they got bought by a bigger company called Heritage Distilling, and I got a call a week ago saying, hey, we need to move the tree sculpture from this place to that place. Can you come cut it up and re-weld it and move this big tree sculpture, and we'll pay you to do it, of course, and blah, blah, blah. What's cool about that is Renee, one of the practices of the recovery framework that we use is called right livelihood, and it's the idea that I shouldn't make my livelihood by selling intoxicants or doing things that could be harmful to other people. And so as an artist, that could mean I shouldn't be making artwork that sits in bars, that's entertaining people who are drinking and possibly doing harm to themselves or their community. And so if I can avoid it, I shouldn't be getting my livelihood from that type of connection. And so when Thinking Tree wants me to move this and pay me what is essentially alcohol money to do something related to my art, what we're using that money to invest in going to a Buddhist retreat that is part of our recovery. So it's money laundering to take alcohol money and put it in the Buddhist community. And that's the way to say, yes, this is how this can fit our practice and our values and still do the thing that we're being asked to do. Yeah. Yeah.
How many places you lived, or just places you moved around, or you've been very local?
Zero. No. Renee's the one who's moved all over the place. She's lived in multiple states and a couple of different countries for periods of time. My family is from here. It's got those connections for me. It feels sort of right-sized for me. There's things that, seem sort of tiresome and small about it sometimes, but as I was looking at how do I make my living as an artist full-time, a generation ago, you would need to move to one of the big hub cities of LA or New York to be doing that. Now with the internet, that you don't have to do that. You can sell art full-time by having an online presence and getting commissions that way, and you can ship things all over the world. I work with a gallery in London, that sells my work, but I've only been to visit there one time. I don't work with them a lot because it's really expensive to ship big heavy metal things overseas. Yeah, you have, oh yeah, no, shipping is its own, there could be its own whole artist talk about shipping nightmares. It's really, really challenging.
I would want to hear that sometime.
It's,
So you do come up with a
yes, it's challenging and expensive. I mean, the most recent example was a gallery in Amsterdam wanted to show a couple of my little rabbit sculptures that are made out of welded steel and found objects. So I shipped them the sculptures at a cost of over $1,000 that I have to pay up front, because you pay to ship it to the gallery tries to sell it, if an gallery in a really, affluent city, so hopefully the rabbits sell. But I pay to get the rabbits there, and they get stopped in customs in the Netherlands, and the message is, we think that you've used Russian iron for these sculptures. And right now, there's an embargo on Russian imports. And it's like, these are found objects. Like, this is probably a lot of cheap Chinese metal, because I've got some old tools and stuff. But what do I need to do? Well, you just need to send a statement certifying that there is no Russian iron in these two rabbit sculptures. So I just wrote out a page and said, these rabbit sculptures have 100% American steel, and I signed it and sent it, and they went through. So you can't even like predict, that something like that will come up, but it does.
And then Surly Earl.
Oh God, which part of Surly Earl?
Yes, about shipping.
Oh yeah, so I in the early summer I got commissioned by a goat farm in southern Missouri to do a goat reared up on its back legs, 8 feet tall. It's huge, and I mean it's on its back legs, and so it was on a platform, and it stands up fine on its own. But when it's time to ship it, it needs to go down sideways and get crated. And so this is Renee and I in the parking lot with some pulleys and winches and things that I think this is going to work. We're going to lower this thing, and I don't know what this stuff weighs, because I'm adding a piece at a time, and it gets quite heavy. And at some crucial point, it's halfway tippy, and it's like, I don't think this is working, but we just have to, too late, we're doing it. And she's saying, we should call some people to help us. This is just me and you. This is physically dangerous. It's too late. We're just going to put this thing down and cross our fingers. And the goat got there, yes.
I have some video of that.
Yes, yeah. The goat got there, and this was a commission I established over just a Facebook contact with somebody, and so after we had arranged a deposit, and he's from this goat farm and everything's cool, I looked at his Facebook profile, and this was a politically repulsive human being as far as what this guy stands for. And without getting too deep, we would disagree on every single axis of and so it was hard to say, do I continue working with this person who's essentially a homophobe and a bigot and a Trumper, and launder the money, yes. This is money you are not going to be able to spend on your political projects, because you're going to, and the place we agree is on loving art enough that you're going to pay me to create the art. And maybe if we can agree on this and we can see each other as slightly more human than we do, maybe we'll end up in a better place. And you can understand you don't need to be afraid of gay people, and I can understand I don't need to hate you because of your politics, and we can come more together. That could be a powerful potential of art and creativity. And that said, I didn't go very directly at anything about, hey man, this is fucking horrible what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, another artist and I were joking about all right, are you going to do a brutalist monument to the new dictatorship if they pay you money? Where is that line going to be of this is beyond my ethics and I still need to pay the electric bill? And these can be really challenging things to weigh out. Where do we come down on that line?
Speaking of economic, you're also very much involved in exploring all the new technology. For example, 3D printing. I'm aware of such a thing exists, but I've never seen one. It's not like something you can go to any office map store and find. I don't think.
No, they've gotten very accessible. So I was intimidated by the technology and the cost, but it's gotten, you can get a 3D printer for a couple $100, and you can get a nice one for $800 to $1,000. And
how it works. So it's like a lot of things.
you can learn any of this on YouTube videos now. So really just like, yeah, yeah.
That thing drops plastic in there
And it melts.
and it
Yeah.
makes whatever you.
Yeah, it's like a really fine hot glue gun that can move and,
It's template you put in it to know that,
I
I mean,
have one in
so,
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
my. And to this.
yeah.
I'm really into these. I've been buying them at the flea market.
Yeah.
I buy them from high school students.
Oh, I
High
thought
school
you said
students
you
and grade students.
No, printed fish. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's really, and then, I mean, you can also get a thing that will scan anything. So if I need my hand, I can scan it and then have that model of my hand as a digital model that I could print, or I can tweak. I can make it have 10 fingers. I can make it this big. I can stretch it out. Yeah.
I'm horse and buggy. Really,
I feel it feels hard to catch up with some of that technology, but it turns out to be more accessible than I was afraid that it was.
they're that cheap. But it seems to me that you have other things too that, I mean, you're welding equipment, and when I had to talk, then you put up this projection screen. I mean, and you can do video and edit video.
Yeah, there's a lot of different skills.
Learning curves.
Yes. No, to do art full-time professionally requires a whole bunch of skills that are not part of being in the studio and aren't very sexy. It's, you know, it's the bookkeeping of, like, you know, saving your receipts and itemizing things so that you're, you know, doing your taxes correctly. It's the marketing of having an email list and putting out, you know, info that I'm talking at noon about the paintings. It is, you know, connecting with collectors and customers and, you know, figuring out, like, what's the conversation with this person? Okay, you're a horrible Republican and we're just going to talk about the goat. Or, okay, you're a really beautiful person and you become a friend as well as a collector in your case. And so, photographing, yeah, using Photoshop. We both manage our own.
To a photo booth here.
Yeah. Yeah, we just, there's, you know, there's lights and backdrop paper, and we move everything out and can create a photo studio here. The first time I had professional photos of my work done in the 90s when I first started making sculpture, I had to pay a photographer $1,000 to get 6 sculptures photographed. And so I thought, like, the next $1,000 I'm going to buy my own stuff and just figure this out. And that was long ago enough that he was making slides for me to send, you know, slides to galleries, and you probably couldn't submit slides anywhere nowadays.
Interesting that this chat is despicable chat. Loves your work, and so there's some kind of.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about animals as a subject in particular is that universality of it brings people together in the appreciation of these creatures that we share the world with. And one of the most powerful examples of that I can think of recently was in Gaza, when the horrible bombing and war was going on and they weren't letting aid through and they weren't letting people out. They paused to let some zoo animals leave Gaza. They weren't letting kids out, but they let the zoo animals out, and everybody agreed, oh, well, these horses are not, they're innocent. We're gonna, like, stop and let them out. Everybody agreed in a situation where nobody was agreeing on anything, even the most basic thing. They rallied around protecting the animals. So that just showed me so powerfully, like, that's an area where people can come together. Art is an area where people can come together. Music is an area where people can come together. And those things in this world seem more important and have more vitality and potential than I think ever before. And there's going to be a lot of challenging people and opinions and things that happen, you know, tomorrow, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever. It's not slowing down. So finding those connections with other people through art and shared appreciation is a great starting point. And then we might find out each of us isn't as scary as the other one thought. Because most of that hatred is rooted in just fear. I mean, the Missouri goat guys were so anti-pronoun and putting memes about this. Like, how often is this coming up in southern Missouri that somebody's asking you to call them they or them? Is this really a part of your daily experience on the goat farm? Or are you just really afraid of something that you don't know very much about? And I think it's more the fear. It's the fear of the unknown, and that a lot of those people can come around as they feel heard, and I hope so. Yeah.
When you look at a piece of junk, do you then think that's going to make a rabbit? I mean,
Yes.
what's
Yeah.
the
I mean,
point where you start?
It's both of those things. So for the junk, one thing that helps me is I don't have very much mechanical knowledge. I use a lot of engine parts and motorcycle parts and machine parts, and I don't know what they're supposed to do. And that helps because I don't have the functional understanding. I can just see it as, that kind of looks like a rabbit's hip. I don't know like what part of the motor it's supposed to do, but I don't have to worry about that. It looks like a rabbit's hip, and so I can pull that out, and as I'm putting together a rabbit, then that's where that'll fit. I also need to have a variety of parts and shapes laying around so that as I put together the rabbit, I need the shoulder or the belly or the ears, I can kind of try and discard or add different things based on how well they work. It's very much like doing a puzzle of just sort of putting up these different things and seeing how it works. And you can, with a welder, you can just sort of gently tack something on and it'll hold into place to where you can look around it. And if it doesn't work, you can bend it or break it off. So it's a really versatile type of sculpting, unlike wood carving or stone carving. Wood carving and stone carving are only reducing the material. You're not able to put anything back on, so they're really unforgiving of mistakes. My medium, I can really go back and forth a number of times, and it allows me to get it wrong 3 times and cut it off and try it again before I finally find exactly the right rabbit ear.
I think as a kid in an art class, there were those who could carve, and there was those who could add.
Yes.
In the sense that, and carving is so decisive.
Yes.
That makes you appreciate Michelangelo for the piece of marble.
Yes.
And others that so when I played with a piece of soap, I found I could wet the soap and stick it back together.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, this question isn't about art, but probably appreciating
Sure.
your personal story, and like what you were talking about in terms of like following allurements. But you also are recognizing like there's some discomfort and discouragement in some of the things that you are moving away from. But I imagine there must be some discomfort and discouragement as you're following.
Oh yeah.
allurements.
Yeah.
And kind of like how are we?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a fascinating piece of it, and I'm glad that you brought it up because it is absolutely not all allurements and fun, and there's strong self-doubt and discouragement and setbacks that happen even in pursuing. Max, the sculptor, is nodding, an absolute understanding of this. So something happens where first of all, we're not able to see our own work with the objectivity that other people see. That's just a part of being the creator. You can't actually step out of your own perception of it and see it the way that other people see it, and you tend to look at it more critically and mean than other people are going to perceive it. So with those, goggles of self-doubt and sort of self-criticism that you can't take off, something in the process of making a piece, about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through, it looks terrible. It looks like it's not working. It's the stupidest idea ever. Why did I do this? I can't sculpt. This is, it's really discouraging, and it's a really believable, strong feeling, and it's really consistent. I've now been doing this for 30 plus years, and I would think that I would have done this enough times and gone through that part enough to not believe it, and it feels just as real every time. Like the giraffe at points is like, oh my God, this is so stupid. This is, why did I do this? And then it's like sculptural PMS. Yeah. That's probably as relatable as I can get to that experience. So you just have to sort of learn to push through that and continue doing it. And part of it is just like, well, I've come this far. I might as well just like finish this thing, and then, I can figure out how to get rid of it or how terrible it is. And then often as you push through that period of self-doubt and concern, you come out the other side and you realize, this is fine. This, the thing that I was believing is not true of it, and I'm glad I pushed through, and that'll never happen again. And then on the very next time, this time it's real, it's terrible, and having a supportive artist partner is helpful in that, because we help each other through those periods of it. But it's, I was doing a commission a year and a half ago where this guy wanted one of his electric guitars getting dragged down by these tentacles, and so it was sort of like a complex, and it was a real guitar with welded steel tentacles around it, so it was technically challenging to like figure out how to do it. And at one point I was like, I can't do this. I'm gonna have to give the deposit back. This is this great collector, he's given us money, and I can't do the tentacles. This is terrible. And she just, got me calm enough to wait some time. The other strategy here is that we have 6 pet rabbits and 2 pigs. And so to go just hold a rabbit and chill the F out for a minute is helpful. Just get yourself centered and out of your head and into present by holding a rabbit who doesn't really care how the sculpture turns out, and then you can go back to it and kind of refresh a little bit. So taking a pause during those moments, and just this is one of the practices of meditation and mindfulness, is you don't have to believe and identify with all the stuff that your brain is telling you. Often it's not helpful. And if you go for the ride and really cling on to it and think that is you, it's going to take you into some terrible places and make you suffer. And if you can step aside and just say, okay, that's this self-doubt thing that seems to happen along the process of making this art. Isn't that interesting? I know that it'll go away. It always has. And yeah, thank you. Good question.
I'm curious about your time, knowing how generous you are with your events and time, and yet, who does all the research of finding public art collections? That takes time.
Yeah, no, it is a full. Well, I pretty well work 7 days a week in one aspect or another, and I love it. I mean, it's I'm blessed to do it, but there is definitely like. I'm not looking at Renee as I'm answering this question for very conscious reasons. There's stress loads of, carrying around the to-do list and feeling behind all the time can be stressful and make you snappy around small things that you don't need to be snappy about. It is a skill to manage those different things and the different facets of like looking at what the public art calls are. Each one is slightly different, so you can't just recycle the same application over and over again. They're very competitive. Most of the time you don't get them. In the last year, I've come really close to some really big ones that I was really excited about, and it's very disappointing to not get it. And so you need some resiliency and some practices in your life. Yeah.
Every time I talk to you,
Yeah.
could you list them for us?
So I have, there's several spots in Eugene. I have the Great Blue Heron at 13th and Alder that was installed in 2012. There's a newer Blue Heron that is made out of chrome on the bike path, recycled chrome, car bumpers, motorcycle parts. There is a chrome Triceratops at Ninkasi's headquarters, where there used to be a restaurant and now it's just their brewery headquarters and keg sales. Some smaller scale stuff. I mean, there's a public art piece in Forest Grove, Oregon, outside of Portland, that is a musical bench. So it's a bench with a big bell that you can ring. I have a full-size Columbia mammoth at a museum in Moses Lake, Washington. That is it's an indoor kind of natural history and art museum, and that got installed in 2011. That was my first big public art project, and they called me because they knew I did found object stuff and said, can you do a full-size Columbia mammoth? And I was still working in my garage at that point, and I was so excited because it was going to be a big public art project and get that part of the resume going. So yes, my team and I can definitely handle the Columbia mammoth out of, found objects, and like hung up the phone like, I have to rent a bigger space and figure out how I'm going to do this thing, because it's enormous. It's 16 feet tall by 22 feet long, and I had to be able to take it apart and then put it back together in the museum, and they didn't want me to weld in there, so it was like a big erector set of a creature. Now looking back, I just like, how did I do that? Why? And they, looking back at how much work it was, they didn't pay me very much. It is hard to get public art projects when you don't have any on your resume of any size. So it's, you do some of the first ones quite cheap in order to try to be competitive for some of the bigger ones, because there's a lot of money available in public art, especially things like airports. There's a lot of money available, and it gives a scale and an audience that you can't really get any other way. I love the potential of public art to put it out in front of everybody. It's not in the gallery or the museum or these expected places. It's just thrown out there in this shared space. So,
You got the shark,
the shark in Longview, Washington, yeah.
Florence.
Yes, yeah. So I have a salmon sculpture in Florence, and then a crab is going to go in there sometime in the next month. I'll take it over. Oh, Blue River, yes. There's the phoenix that is part of Blue River. So phoenix rising out of metal that was salvaged after the fires. So that was probably the most heartfelt project in terms of being asked by a community who had just been through these devastating fires, can you help us do something positive out of this horrible experience? We're now cleaning up these burned lots, and there's all this scrap metal. Can you do something?
There's a picture in the office of
Yeah,
the article.
yeah.
Wenatchee.
Yes, yeah.
So it's already there?
Yeah. It's in Blue River. Here. It's right here.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah, so it's mostly stuff that was salvaged from the fires, and that community was so devastated, and to this day they're not done rebuilding. They've had such a hard time with insurance companies and county permitting, and it's like a whole second level of trauma that has happened to that community. And a lot of people, it's a small community, a lot of them moved and are not going to come back and rebuild. So it completely changed it. But there are people who have contacted me and said, they've cried when they saw that, they've left flowers, it gets decorated around Christmas. They really interact with it in these ways that are extremely meaningful. And so my current public art project is for Wenatchee, Washington. And so I was asked to do a full-size horse and rider to commemorate the last tribal chief. And the tribe there is actually called the Piscosa tribe. They're called the Wenatchees sort of as slang by, the U.S. government sort of mislabeled them early on, and that nickname or that surname has stuck, but it's not truly accurate to what they call themselves. So the Piscosa tribe, tribal council in the city of Wenatchee asked me to do a horse and rider commemorating the last Piscosa chief. His name was John Harmelt, and he died in 1937. So I've got a full-size horse out of found objects, and I'm building the chief right now. The horse is down in the studio, and if you want to look at it after we're done, you can see the horse. And it'll get installed this summer, so I need to get the chief built and on the back of the horse and then get it up there. And that is a really meaningful project, to be asked to handle somebody else, somebody's heritage, how to commemorate First Peoples and do that in a way that honors them. The tribe requested certain animals from their tribal legends be depicted on the horse. So there's a coyote and a bear and a sparrowhawk and a salmon and an owl, all in different parts of the horse. And it's a project that I got because I had done the other public art projects and have been able to get on a list of public artists for Washington State. So the city of Wenatchee was able to just look at this list and say, that guy does found object stuff. We'll call him and see if he wants to do it.
It's not being a renaissance where you would have a sponsor or, I just,
Right.
I can't imagine that, if you want to call it self-promotion, but all of what you do to finance that place, it doesn't drain your own creativity.
No, it's sort of in service of it, because if once I make the art, if I just have it in my space and show it to my friends, it doesn't really achieve its potential as a work of art in the world. It's its own thing. It needs to go out and be in the world. And the most...
To initiate the contact and possibility to do that, in the commercial vein, actors have agents. Agents have, you know, if you're in Hollywood, you have an agent. You know, they won't talk to you.
Right,
If you're a novelist of importance, you have an agent.
right.
You don't have an agent.
No.
We have a Jerry.
Yes. Oh, I mean, you have people that like your work and will help share it, and so it gets out that way. Because the internet is such a visual medium, that's been really helpful for artists to get known in places we wouldn't have our work seen otherwise. You know, things are easy to share on social media or copy and paste. Before social media, I sort of realized that, oh, there are people writing blogs trying to do daily updates and get an audience, and they need content for the blog, and I need an audience for my art. So I can find this tech blog and say, hey, look at this thing I've done out of recycled materials. If you want to use it, just credit me, and they would, you know, post the sculpture out of recycled materials as part of their tech blog, kind of celebrating recycling. And so then this one post could generate thousands of new people who are aware of my art. And that sort of marketing can begin to kind of carry itself. But it is, you know, it does take some energy and effort to do it. And
So you don't sleep.
I sleep pretty well these days. No, it's just like, it's recognizing I can't get to everything I might possibly do in any of these categories. So what's reasonable to do, what's in balance, and what feels right. And when I'm excited about the project, it has its own momentum and energy. So it doesn't take as much, you know, kind of to carry it forward.
Stories about projects you didn't get.
Because speaking of, Judd has to be at another gallery at 2 o'clock to do another talk.
I'm okay. It's 1 o'clock now, so we'll wrap it up shortly.
We want to
But
talk about Mark Clark's show.
oh yeah.
You are welcome to go to that.
Yeah. So the legitimate gallery in town, the Carr and Clark Gallery, not over in industrial West Eugene in a warehouse. Carr and Clark Gallery has a show that is up for the next 2 months that is Mark Clark's paintings. So Mark Clark was Karin's father and a renowned Northwest landscape and portrait painter and sculptor, just a really creative person. He died in 2016. And so these are paintings from his estate. And I've developed a friendship with Karin, and she likes my work. And so she said if I wanted to show some of my rabbit sculptures alongside her dad's retrospective, that she would love to have those there. So 2 of my rabbit sculptures are there, and then a large dragonfly sculpture that I made specifically for that show. And so the reception for that is in an hour, and I will be also there and speaking some more. There's a person from the U of O, an art history professor, who's talking about Mark Clark's work. So because he's obviously not able to be there at his own opening reception, they've got somebody who's very knowledgeable about his place in the...
And his wife, Margaret.
Yeah, his wife Margaret Coe is a Margaret Coe. Yeah, Margaret was his wife, is his wife, and she is a very well-known Pacific Northwest painter. They were both full-time artists for their whole lives together. Karin, the gallerist, is an artist in her own right. Margaret is 83 and still paints every day. She just had a show a couple of months ago at the Karin Clark Gallery and sold almost all of the paintings. You know, and it was just stuff from her backyard. She lives in sort of the edge of town, right near Hendricks Park, and she just goes and sets up in her backyard or paints from photos and has a studio at her house. She's become a collector of mine, so she's bought probably 4 or 5 of my sculptures and seems to continue to want to collect things. So she's such a joyful person to be around. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.